Welcome to Footy4MySoul, where curiosity, caring, courage, and creativity shape our exploration of this beautiful game. Connecting experiences from the pitch to life. This is your space to learn and to be inspired. Whether you're a player, coach, parent, mentor, or anyone, let us enjoy this journey of beautiful growth. Welcome to Footy4MySoul. I'm genuinely excited to introduce Beth Wolfgram, a global leader in performance nutrition who's dedicated her career to helping athletes fuel their bodies for peak performance and overall well-being. In today's episode, we're diving into everything from holistic wellness to performance nutrition and how Beth has positively impacted both spaces and minds with her unique, personalized approach. Beth has spent decades working with elite athletes, most recently at Dartmouth College, where she partnered with athletes and coaches of dozens of teams to optimize performance and recovery. Before that, Beth was a director of sports nutrition at the University of Utah, supporting over 500 student athletes. For 16 years, she was the go-to dietitian for the Utah Jazz. She helps shape nutrition and recovery strategies for athletes at the highest level, making these insights so valuable because it's this dual expertise of supporting soccer, but also the exposure to so many other sports, because learning from other sports can be very meaningful to advancing this beautiful game. Besides her hands-on work, Beth has held leadership roles in professional organizations dedicated to advancing sports nutrition, and she's currently helping to train the next generation of experts through an immersion program that she co-leads, and we're going to get into this with regards to mentorship and sports nutrition. Beth's knowledge isn't just theoretical. She's an athlete herself, having completed her first Ironman triathlon in Lake Placid in 2022, something I don't think I'm going to get around to doing. But she truly understands the demands of a high-level performance athlete. In this episode, Beth will clear up any confusions around performance diets, bust some of the biggest myths floating around social media. We're going to go through practical tips for athletes, coaches, parents on how to approach nutrition with balance and consistency. We're going to dive into mental health, sleep, the importance of personalized nutrition plans, because there's really no one-size-fits-all when it comes to fueling your body. Beth will guide us on how to fuel with purpose, to meet your specific goals no matter where you're at or stage you're at in life. Please don't forget to subscribe to Footy4MySoul. And check out our website. Explore our Experiences Connected journal, which you could also read on Substack. We're going to go in deeper into these episodes. Please stay tuned for this conversation. It might change your approach to nutrition, performance, and how you fuel your body for success. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Beth Wolfgram, welcome to Footy4MySoul.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. We've known each other for a few years. Never sat down in a chair to talk about something of this nature. So I'm excited and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited.
And to our listeners and supporters, albeit a parent or a mentor looking after the best well-being of the player, or a coach who can affect a player more than they sometimes think they do with inspiring confidence and best practices. This is a journey we're going to take through what I'll call you being a trailblazer of performance nutrition. But it's more than that for you. It's actually trailblazing this. We're going to talk a lot about your journey for performance nutrition, but then taking it the next level of mentoring groups, individuals, to take both the art and the science of performance nutrition and make it their own. So the legacy of what you're doing is so scalable, not only for soccer, football, footy, but many other sports. But we're going to start a bit cynical. All right?
Okay.
Performance nutrition. I watch YouTubes and hacks and all these little things that I can do, and I'm a bit crazy. I do some of them. I make sure I get the Baja salts and I get my feet in the ground. I do some grounding.
Yep. Yep.
and I'm not in great shape, but I'll have my athletic greens.
Mm-hmm.
I know my macros. I sleep well. I'm told there's hacks. It's easy. Just do this and you're going to live forever. So
Yeah.
before we get into the journey of Beth Wolfgram and everything we talk about, is it that easy?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I mean, I think so much has changed in the last several years with the impact that social media, whether it's what we hear in podcasts, what we hear on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, other modes of transferring information, we're inundated with information all the time. Information that previously we would have had to either read in a book, go to the library, purchase some type of textbook or training module, or go see a professional for. So this is information that is readily available at our fingertips, and a lot of it is contradicting each other. Mm-hmm. You'll see one person says you need X amount of protein, and it's more important than anything. And then you see somebody else saying, but no, you need this many grams of carbohydrates, and this is more important. Somebody says electrolytes. Somebody else says, your athletic greens or your fruits and vegetables. So there's a lot of information, and a lot of it is contradictory, and it's really, I think, confusing for the average person. I think that people are looking for a hack or a simple way of navigating their health when it doesn't have to be that complicated. Usually it's starting with some of the basics and making sure you've got adequacy, you're fueling adequately, is always the first thing I start with. And for some people, that is really a big challenge just because of food insecurity, or, the ability to fuel in the way that they want to, or that their sport or their health requires, or what they prefer. So it's really a privilege to be able to say, oh, I can take X supplement or X type of food to enhance my overall health, when there are a lot of people that are just not getting enough food, and food accessibility is an issue. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to start with the basics of that. And I always say nutrition it's kind of like building a house. You start with the foundations, and is there enough food overall? Are you getting well-balanced meals? Are you able to eat regularly? Are you getting fruits and veggies and grains and protein? And then you start putting in the extra things okay, what can we do to ensure you're getting adequate vitamins and minerals? And are you getting enough fluids? And getting more into some of the weeds, the particulars. And that's where I think some of the hacks start with that. So to me, it's almost like they're putting a roof on the house before they've even laid the foundation and built the walls. So I think the hacks and what we see have made my job challenging, because it's a lot of myth busting. And I see a lot of people will come in and they're doing some, crazy morning routine, and yet they're not, fueling their body enough, or they're not getting adequate carbohydrates at all throughout the day, or they're skipping meals, and yet they have this crazy elaborate morning routine, which is really not the foundation. They're skipping over some of the foundational things.
I have a question on the foundation, because let's take a step back from performance nutrition and just think of it from the perspective of a parent or the mentor, because often players don't want to hear it from the parents. They'll hear it from a teammate or someone else. So whoever has the ear and the implicit trust of the player, whether it shouldn't matter if you're 5 or 20 going into college, still the foundational aspects, I'm kind of going to ask you, think about well-being broadly. And if there's a foundation that says, well, sports athletics, so the actual trainer, the training side of it, the how much you run, how strong am I, strength and conditioning, call that a modality, if you will. Okay. Sports psychology and mental health, there's another one. That's another foundation. You got to get right, right? Performance nutrition. I'd argue today there's when done right, there's still multiple house with multiple foundations. too?
Yes. Yes.
So as we think about this conversation, the journey of sports, of performance nutrition, do you think that it's a problem and I know that you've done a great job working with like the sports, the athletic fitness side of the world in partnerships. Are there enough partnerships between the nutrition, the mental health, and the strength and conditioning from a holistic standpoint? And we'll get to it in terms of your career, whether it be at Utah with the Utah Jazz or with helping Dartmouth or what you do today.
Yeah.
But as you can be incredible at what you do. They can listen to you, but are there multiple foundations, or is there one foundation, or is that too utopia? Is that question like utopia that won't happen?
I mean, in an ideal world, we would all be working together because it's for the well-being of the athlete, right? The physical health, the emotional health, the well-being, we're all on the same page. I think in an optimal settings, that's happening. You know, if you look at a lot of professional sports, that's happening. If you look at a lot of bigger Division I programs, that's happening. There may be some other schools at the D2, D3, maybe a few high schools who have a forward-thinking approach and have really developed that multidisciplinary team, which is really what it is. It's a multidisciplinary team, and looking at the athlete or the individual as a human being and as a whole, because what you eat and how you fuel your body impacts your injuries. It impacts your playing time. It impacts your recovery. It impacts your work in the weight room. It impacts your work in the classroom or at work. So many different things. It overlaps on a lot of different things. There are a lot of levels that it's not happening. And there's a lot of missing links. And I think if you're looking at young athletes who are in high school or, age group athletes or, younger, you don't see that multidisciplinary approach yet.
So I actually really oversimplified the multidisciplinary side to really the strength, the conditioning, and then there's prevention, and then there's what you eat, and then there's your mental health side of it, right?
Right.
Today, now you have to add to it, I'd argue, the social media, the distractions.
Yes.
I mean, does that, I'm going to call it a modality, but is that like part of, that spans every one of these foundations?
Yes.
Where does sleep fall in? That's the one other part of, I look at some of the athletes, and my daughter's in high school, but I get the sense because of the phone more than anything, kids are sleeping far less. Where does sleep fall into? Is it in? It's not part of nutrition. It's part of well-being.
Yeah.
What foundation is that in, if you will, or should it be in
it? I feel like it impacts everything so much. It's really the biggest thing. I think it's the biggest thing that we face as a challenge, not only with young athletes but with people in general. Quality of sleep and quality of, or the ability, I guess I should say, for us to disconnect and have downtime in our brain and our physical body has just shifted so much with so many distractions. I mean, there are so many of us who came from a time when like the news was on at a certain time and then you shut it off and you didn't see it again till the next night. You couldn't see 24-hour news or sports replays, or you couldn't pop on and watch videos of people grocery shopping or learning how to decorate their room or whatever. Like now we are inundated with information, and I think it really impacts sleep, particularly with college students and young adults, high school students. And then that impacts their nutrition, which impacts their training, which impacts their, how they're doing in the classroom, and then how they're performing in every area of their life. I mean, it's really a trickle-down effect. I feel like sleep is the big, if I was putting like a big ticket thing, that's the sleep.
Okay, number one. So obviously what we try to do with Footy4MySoul is be curious and ask those questions. And, that's one in my experience. And then I'm looking at it from a grassroots to club sports to college sports to being part of professional organization for soccer. Sleep, even from listening to the coaches talk to the players in terms of expectations, maybe it's curfew 10 o'clock, but it really isn't part of a holistic plan. Yeah. So it's interesting. I just want to get through as we talk about your journey. I mean, you've uncovered something, and I think it's fair to say that's one element. When you think of well-being, it's not just what are we supposed to do with sleep? how do we help coaches?
Yeah.
How do we help mentors? And I think maybe that's something when we get to the mentorship side of what you do, you can get into, because it's going to be different for everybody depending on age, demographics, work responsibilities, etc. So,
and I think, that brings up a really good point. You mentioned right at the beginning, hacks and the information that we're getting. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about nutrition and about my field is there's a one size that fits all and everybody should do XYZ, whatever that is. I saw this in a movie. I saw this on a documentary. I saw this podcast person mentioned we should all be doing this. And there is this sense that that is the only way to do things. And I would say there are certainly some overlapping goals and recommendations. We all need fluids and we need to have balance in our diet, and we need to fruits and veggies and those kind of things. But nutrition is very individualized. What works for me may not work for you. What works for you may not work for your daughter. And so on a team, especially if you're at in a situation where you're working with multiple teams, those athletes are all individual humans and their needs are very different. They come from different genetic backgrounds. Somebody may have a history of high blood pressure. Somebody else may have history of diabetes. Somebody else may have celiac disease. Someone else may have some type of food allergy. So even though there are overriding principles of nutrition that are just in the science is what we know to be scientifically valid and true, at the end of the day, there's an art to it because everyone's different.
So as we get into the journey with the Utah Jazz and with Dartmouth and now on your own as a mentor and a leader within performance nutrition and well known globally, at least nationally. You globally well known, we'll give you global. We'll take it. Take the win.
I'll take the win.
Take the win. Being a trailblazer is hard. And one thing we do in every podcast episode is we had put Footy4MySoul talk about the butterfly effect. And the one question is for folks listening, we kind of give our guest in advance is that's one we'll talk about. And, our guests are like, oh, interesting. And they start thinking about that random act of kindness or that person or that event before they sit down and have a discussion. Now, when we spoke before getting on air, it was so interesting because your butterfly effect in your journey as being a path breaker was finding more people like you that think the way you do.
Yes.
Now, if someone were to say to me within performance nutrition, something that must be so crucial to the well-being of athletes, that before around the internet period, let's just say for folks listening, 25 years ago, the notion of performance nutrition was a handful of people with scientific backgrounds that cared about it, that were disparately all over the place, that found each other. So tell me about your trailblazing journey before we get into these actual places. Why did you decide to get into this? When did you figure out you were a trailblazer? Like, did you run into does no one want to listen to this? Am I creating a new field? Tell us about the journey.
Well, I started in exercise physiology. That was my undergraduate degree. And then I realized I had traveled to Australia, I had traveled to London, I had lived in both places. So much of what I was getting questions on and needing expertise on was related to nutrition. So then I was like, I really think I want to get my master's degree in nutrition. And in the meantime, I felt like there's such a way you could benefit people who are active, whether it's very active individuals or elite athletes. And at the time, there were a handful of people who were doing some things here and there that you knew of, but literally you could count them on one hand.
Really?
Like it was just, there was no one doing it. And when you would say, I think I want to combine these two areas of expertise, nutrition and fitness, or nutrition and, wellness, or like any, athletic performance, like people just shook their head. Like it wasn't really a thing. It wasn't a job. So you're going to have to pick something else, basically. Like what else could you do?
Didn't it used to be, I'm going back to the 90s when I was in college, and we had trainers. There wasn't a performance nutrition person at the school I went to in the Northeast. But going back before that, it was Gatorade and oranges. Call it a day, and then you're going to eat tons of carbs. Because no one thought back then this notions of the paleo or any other way of, eating more fat than carbs. It was just you had a bunch of carbs.
Yeah.
You had, I would say in the 80s, it was fruits were your nutrition. That's all you think about, oranges and apples and bananas. And you had Gatorade, which we now you'll probably dispel that it's probably not good for you. The early Gatorade, I'm sure you'll tell us that. However,
you might be
the
surprised.
bigger theme of you're going to teach us that we're not fueling enough, that maybe it is okay. But talk us through in that era, when you say we're going to be linking together performance with nutrition, what was like the first recipe when you had that first athlete or first group before Utah Jazz? But you just get your first few clients.
Yeah.
What was their starting point? Like, where was their mind? It's not like today where everyone's thinking differently because all the information.
Yeah.
They knew nothing.
Yeah.
So what was the early recipe?
The funny thing is, a lot of people think it's very high level nutrition, and a lot of times it's not. It's getting people to, with their schedule and with all their demands, getting them to eat breakfast. It's getting them to have something to eat after a hard training session. It's helping them strategize, how do I refuel when we're in the middle of nowhere and we have a 4-hour bus ride? So it's not always, it can be high level. It can be a lot of calculating and looking at sweat rates and grams per kilogram per hour and things. But most of the time it's not. It's helping athletes take the science of what I know and what, we know from the field of nutrition and applying it to their life. And that's the biggest thing, is how can I apply this to my life? And does it have to be like, oh, I'm only eating grilled chicken and kale? No, absolutely not. So there's a misconception that it has to be really difficult or that you have to give up certain foods for performance nutrition to have an impact. So in the beginning, and I would say to some degree, even now, it's just helping people, because athletes are people, helping them to strategize how to incorporate good fueling principles, or appropriate fueling principles is a better word, into their lifestyle. Knowing you can't do 100% of everything. You're never going to check every single box. There's always going to be a challenge. You're going to have a game that runs longer. You're going to have a bus ride that got delayed. You're going to have a flight that didn't happen. You're going to be stuck in an airport. You're going to have run out of things for dinner. You're going to have no energy because you had a long practice and then class. Like, that's life. So my job is to take the science and help you navigate those things that happen.
Is timing more important than quality of what you eat?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes when I have athletes who haven't eaten all day, and I just had this conversation with another sports dietitian just this week, the goal is to get them to eat something. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You need to get something in. So it doesn't matter if it's pizza or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or a bowl of cereal or whatever. We just need to get that adequacy going. And that goes back to the very beginning of having adequate fuel, and then fuel in nutrition world is calories. And so having adequate calories. And then we start getting into maybe some of the weeds. But if you have somebody who's not fueling adequately, then we have lots of challenges ahead. Lots of challenges.
Okay, then let's start at the Utah Jazz around 2000-ish, after, right? Now, the context I'm thinking about, it would be watch a Premier League football player with of course, the sensors and tracking every last digit and number and multiple trainers. That's where they're at today.
Yeah.
We're not yet at the discussion of multiple trainers and how you handle it. I definitely want to talk to you about that. But in the context of Utah Jazz, when you were there, were there any athletes, when you looked at their behaviors and what they were doing, that was just broken? You're like, we need to fix this. And did it change their performance or did it change their life. And what I mean by that is sometimes good nutrition and fueling helps you in other ways.
Yeah.
Mental health, better sleep,
Right.
etc. But from performance standpoint, when you're at the Jazz, you come in as an expert. They start to embrace you, because this is new, right? Performance nutrition for a professional basketball team in early 2000s didn't happen.
Yeah.
I think you told me Karl Malone had a personal trainer that looked at the numbers, and a chef, which makes sense. You have to figure that out.
Yep.
How they're changed? What changed in their life when you came in?
I mean, I think you could take any professional sport and you would see 20 something years ago, things were very, very different. There was very little interest in nutrition. People didn't see the overall impact or how it could help them athletically. And in the past, really, like, it was related to hydration, which is what the athletic trainers did. Athletic trainers were the hydration people. And it was related to supplements, which is often what the strength coaches did. So the strength coaches and the athletic trainers were kind of like the nutrition people because it was related to supplements and hydration. So in the beginning of sports nutrition as a actual career, a full-time career, many people thought, like, why do we need somebody else? Like, we're already getting this taken care of. And so there was so much, of course, there's so much more to nutrition than just supplements and hydration. And so, you know, myself and others in my field saw this as such an opportunity to impact not only health and well-being, but their performance overall. So, you know, starting off like the first several years at University of Utah, it was very, very basic stuff. Seeing if you could start to change the culture of the messaging around nutrition. Can we offer, when we offer meals, can we offer well-balanced performance fueling plates instead of fried chicken, French fries, and ice cream the night before a game?
So the modern view of this, and this is if you look, just you shop the outside of the store, you don't buy anything the inside of the store, use the whole foods. Is it fair to say that the athlete in the early 2000s playing professional basketball, for example, was not having enough fiber, enough protein, enough whole foods relative to how they are today because of just it's what we understand today? Is it significant?
I mean, I think in general, it's not just the NBA. I think people in general are fueling their bodies differently. Like there's more knowledge, there's more awareness, there's more interest, and there's more connecting the dots. Like what I eat tonight impacts my performance tomorrow. And that wasn't always the case. People didn't have that point of like making that connection of this impacts that.
Can we dig into that comment for a second? What I ate last night impacts how I play today, okay? The athletes of today, when they look at their little cheat sheets of eating, it's always like, well, 4 hours before the game, I need to do this, and 2 hours right before, and then typically like the banana, and then maybe and I've seen some of yours, you know, peanut butter and jelly sandwich after. Yeah. So cool little ideas. But I don't think the youth and even most colleges that may not have a performance nutritionist think about the night before. Yeah. College, at least, they were still partying the night before, right? Yeah. So how big is it, though? So what I may think about is how important is, we talk about sleep as being important. The meal the night before a game has how much of an effect on your performance?
Well, I would argue it's like a bigger picture of things. It's not just one meal. It's not just the night before. It's like, what's that saying of like how you do anything is how you do everything? Like it's the consistency piece. It's the consistency. It's like, are you eating like on Monday? Are you recovering from your training session? And say, you know, then you have practice Tuesday. Well, did you recover? Did you fuel for it? Did you recover? Same thing on Wednesday. Thursday, you have a game Saturday. Like, have you done all of those things leading up to Saturday? Or did you skip meals, sleep in, not eat dinner, not recover, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all of a sudden Thursday, you're like, oh, I need to start thinking about this. Then you're behind. Like it's the consistency piece. So it's not one meal or one day that impacts. It's just being consistent. And I would say on the flip side of that, like that's why in my view, there's no like wrong food to have or anything that you shouldn't eat. There's no bad foods.
No, people are so happy to hear you
I
say
know.
that. It's just one of those things where it's like, this is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a time and a place for
There's a time
everything.
and a
Like
place.
if you have a big plate of nachos or, chicken fingers and fries, and then you go try to play a football game, like you're probably going to struggle. You're probably going to have some GI distress. You're going to have a bellyache. But there's a time and a place for those, and you should enjoy some nachos or a cheeseburger or whatever it is that you really like. And I think that's, like, if we're talking about myths, that's another myth of nutrition, is that there's good food and bad food. And that's, unless you have some type of food intolerance or allergy or some type of medical condition, there's no reason to avoid particular types of food if you enjoy them.
But an ultra-processed Doritos, I mean, if you think about we're going to segue to the Dartmouth experience in the Ivy League in a minute, but I get the sense sometimes when you're in your journey, you come across, like, you can eat what you want, which that you'd argue these other foundations would say, awesome, I want to work with this person. She's not making things difficult. She's not creating artificial barriers to make it hard, because you seem to be, this is all doable. It's about timing and consistency and ease.
Yeah.
Okay. So it should be embraced. As you're at the Utah Jazz and moving on to Dartmouth, did you feel as if, as one of the path breakers, trailblazers here doing this, that you're continuously having to push and proselytize this stuff? Or is it, the push versus pull? Mm-hmm. How much of it is, oh my God, I'm still pushing this stuff on people, versus them saying, okay, let me take this in. This makes sense. Is it still misunderstood?
I think
where's it at?
A lot has shifted. Athletes want to know, like, what they can do better, how they can sleep better, how they can take care of themselves, how they can prevent injuries. Not everybody, though. Some people just, what I have learned over the years also is athletes at all levels have a lot pulling at them. They have a coach. They may have a coach, a trainer, parents. Maybe they have a scholarship. Maybe they're the first person in their family to be able to earn some money for their sport. Maybe they have, parental involvement. Like, there's lots of different things pulling at them. And so nutrition and food can become another one of those things. And so I think, like everything in life, there's a delicate balance there's a dance of figuring out when to push a little and when to back off. And it shouldn't become a big stressor. Like, nutrition should not be stressful. It should not be something that causes more stress to an athlete. And so if they're in a position that they have a lot on their plate, no pun intended, then it might be time to just say, you know what, this is it. This is the best we're going to do right now. And I've had situations like that you have an athlete who's really struggling. Maybe there's mental health stuff going on. Maybe there's something that's happened in the family. They're in the middle of their season. It's not the time to really focus on, let's overhaul your nutrition. No, we wait until the off season. We wait until you're ready to do that. We shift gears, and it just is kind of status quo. And that's okay. You have to respect where people are in their journey, because where I think they might go or what they could work on, that doesn't matter. It's where they're ready to go. And when they're ready, they'll be ready. And I've had that happen, like 2 or 3 years later. An athlete may come and say, you know what? You came and did a team talk to our soccer team back when I was a freshman, and I didn't listen to any of it. And now I'm a senior, and I'm thinking, I've been injured for the last year, and I want to get some good playing time for this last senior year. And I want to know, like, what can I do? I didn't want to hear it then, but I want to hear it now. So I think you have to respect where an athlete is.
Well, now, if there's apps, and I'll just make this more of the middle school, high school context for a second of an athlete of any sport. With all the apps on their phone, there are many apps right now that can very easily let them know that sugar drink they had was 40 grams of fructose, and that apple had 4 grams of fiber. And yeah, there's sugar in both, but I'm going to take the apple. So the knowledge is at their fingertips now. Doing it is very easy. Putting it in is very easy. I guess the question is, it comes down to the push and the pull and the parent, because it's really the parent that's going to be pressing.
Yeah.
I'd argue
at that level, yes.
At the level up until college, it's the parent dynamic with the child. And I say child, right? I mean, My daughter's driving a car right now. It's hard to call her a child. She has her app and she knows what she's eating, but I think that's an exception to the rule. What do parents do? And I know it's not an easy answer to this, but the resource of understanding when to push, because this is something you'd argue the athlete has to figure out and has to want to do it. So what best practice is there? Is there one?
Yeah, such a, it's $1 million question, right? I think the delicate balance of this is you don't want to create a situation where people haven't, or their children or anybody has an unhealthy relationship with food. And that's what I see. The vast majority of the college athletes, high school and college athletes I see have an unhealthy relationship with food because they grew up with food rules. Things were good and bad. You couldn't have this. You didn't have this food because it's not healthy or whatever. There was a lot of morality around foods. So then you have these young adults who are getting these messages, and then they're seeing images on TikTok and Instagram and things of like what people look like who are not athletes usually. And they're seeing that and they're doing a lot of comparison, and then they're struggling because it's a hard time emotionally. There's a lot going on for teenagers and fitting in and all this stuff. And then it's like the perfect storm. And then when they get to college or young adults, we often see very high rates of disordered eating, clinical eating disorders, body dysmorphia, body dissatisfaction, mental health issues around food. So that being said, I think the thing to not do is to put food into good and bad and make it a moral issue. And we don't eat cake because it doesn't have any nutritional value. We only eat this because it's full of nutrients. Now, that being said, I'm not suggesting everyone sit down and have a plate of cupcakes for breakfast every morning. Like, there's a balance to this. And I think, I also have a teenager, and I think that my suggestion is to be a good role model without being extreme yourself. And so that means at our house, we have a bucket that has candy in it. It has M&Ms, and it has I just bought some pumpkin flavored cookies. It has some things in there, but there's also a huge drawer full of fruits and vegetables, and we have Greek yogurt, and we have chicken, and we have milk, and we have grains, and we have everything. But the candy or the sweets are not completely off limits. And if we choose to have, this particular summer, we had ice cream for dinner a couple times, and that's okay. It didn't make or break our health. It didn't mean that I'm any less of an athlete or less healthy myself. We enjoyed it. It was a hot summer night. And then we move on and we just have a more what you consider traditional meal the next night. And I think for parents to move away from the morality of this is good and this is bad and let it kind of just the dust to settle is often scary because they think like, well, what if I don't? My child's going to go crazy. I guarantee you they may go crazy for the first bit and then they're going to be like, I'm not feeling so good. I think I need to have like a turkey sandwich for lunch instead of, just skipping lunch or, I think I'm not really feeling very fueled. And it helps them to come to that conclusion on their own. And it's hard to do because a lot of us didn't learn that, right? As parents and coaches, we didn't learn that. But that's one of the biggest challenges I see young adults facing when they get to the high school, college level is that so many food rules and do's and don'ts and so much information that they're kind of over analyzing it all, to be honest. They're overthinking it all and making it really complicated when food is fuel for sure. And it is also to be enjoyed. It's something we should celebrate when we get people together, a team or family. It's connection, it's community, it's all of those things in addition to being fuel. So it's not just the fuel piece.
I will give credit to the colleges, for example, which you'd see on most campuses relative to what was being served 30 years ago. It's night and day in terms of what's available in Whole Foods. So it's there. It wasn't there in the past.
No.
Now, there are issues for folks that don't have that capacity. And we should be talking about that because, many a podcast is about pay to play in soccer, and it's, those get it. And then, unfortunately it's socioeconomic driven.
Yes.
And so is this food discussion. So we're going to have to break this conversation in a second, but let's go into the context of those that do have the financial means. Sadly, to start, there might be a question of, isn't there just an easy diet? Like, I don't have the time. Can you just give me the easy button? And I'm going to throw one out there because they would say all diets end up dying. The Mediterranean diet is a lifestyle diet. It has all the pieces. Couldn't I just do the Mediterranean diet? Doesn't that give me enough to be a performance athlete? And let's just say if yes, if that is close enough, why isn't there kind of this works, it's easy, and then therefore, hey, head of performance, here's the sports at the school. We have 5,000 more students over here. They should be doing this too. We're going to make this possible. It's obviously not that easy, but if someone says to you, Beth, I need to know what diet should I follow, what lifestyle one, which is the best one, how do you, you don't have to answer it.
Yeah.
Often you have to say it's individual or whatever you do, but how do you answer that?
Yeah. How I answer it is I say it is individual. It depends on, not only does it depend on like your genetic makeup and age and who you are and, what you do during the day. Are you sitting at a desk or are you, I work with college athletes who are not only doing 2 practices a day, but they're walking around campus 5 or 6 miles in between classes and back to their dorm and here and there. So, and then what are your goals athletically? Like, are you trying to win a national championship? Are you trying to qualify for, Olympics or Worlds or are you trying to do a 5K? Like, what are your goals? So it depends on a lot of those things. That being said, I start with like building a healthy, balanced fueling plate. And usually that is, if you're looking at a plate in front of you, which is how we eat, right? We don't eat in grams and in servings and portions and things. We eat by looking at the plate. I always say like you should aim for 3 things. You get some type of carbohydrate. So that might be rice, potatoes, pasta, bread, a tortilla, an English muffin, anything of that sort. You aim to get some type of protein source. Could be an egg, could be chicken, could be fish. It could be
very simple.
Yeah. And then you aim to get a fruit and vegetable.
That's it.
Color. And then you aim for all of that. Now, it doesn't have to look fancy on a plate. It might be in a burrito. And your tortilla has some chicken and some salsa and a little bit of guac and some lettuce. And you've got a little bit of everything. If you just sat down and ate tortillas tonight for dinner, one night's not going to hurt. But if that's what you did every night, well, you'd probably be missing out on some protein. If you just sat down and ate a bunch of chicken every night for dinner, same thing. It just wouldn't be balanced. So aim for some grains or carbohydrates, some protein, fruit and vegetable.
So question then, this devil's advocate question, this will be hard, is how much do I eat of that? And so I'm going to give you context of, there was a time you just look at, I did 14,000 steps, therefore burn that many calories, and I just got to eat a little bit less than that and I won't gain weight. It's kind of the calorie in, calorie out principle. So we're not sponsored by Whoop, but I'm sure you know what a Whoop band is. And I wore it for 6 months and my daughter wears one now. And not only to tell you your sleep, which is important, but you'll see the actual burn to the best using all their algorithms and so forth, how many calories you burned. So you can pretty simply say, if that number was 2,700, the size of that plate for that chicken should be 2 pieces of chicken this time. But if I was kind of a lazy bum that day and I only burned 2,200 calories, maybe I'll just have 1 piece of chicken. It's not very scientific. So how do you know if you don't have the Whoop and you don't have a performance nutritionist at your Division I school you're at, how do you know how much you burned, therefore how much you should eat? Yeah. If it's that simple.
And I would argue you don't even need to know. Like it's not, it's not something you need to know or figure out or spend. Like if it's something you're super interested in, maybe it's something you could figure out. I would be concerned if someone's so focused on that could be a little disordered and kind of taking them away from a healthy relationship with food. But you don't need to get into the weeds with that because our body has this ability to regulate our hunger and our satiety. And at the end of the day, if you're walking around every day and you're hungry when you leave a meal, you're probably not getting enough food. If you are training really hard and you're not making any gains, you're not getting stronger, you're not getting faster, you're getting injured, you're having a hard time sleeping, you might be under fueling. And so it's simple to look at some of those things and just be like, I'm getting enough. And if I always, when I'm doing an assessment with an athlete, I look at like, what's your energy level? How much sleep are you getting? What's your mood like? How are you doing in your classes or at work? Can you focus? Do you enjoy your meals? Are you having quality time sitting down to meals with people? I may ask about body weight and see, like, do you have large fluctuations? Is it pretty much the same? How are you doing performance wise? All of those things tell me a lot about how an athlete's doing. And if they're under fueling and super focused on calories in and calories out, and yet all of those other things are like, down in the, in the toilet, so to speak, you've got like low energy and struggling with sleep and you can't get over this certain injury, and then you recover and then you're injured with something else again. It's often a sign of energy in and energy out are not at a place where you are matching up, essentially, and they're underfueled. And so we have, athletes who have lots of injuries and then their performance is impacted. So I think it doesn't have to be overly complicated. It really, there's people that like to follow, and look and calculate and things, but I also am a little bit, I just take it with a grain of salt. Like, okay, let's just look like, what's the purpose of this? And is it helping you? Or is it taking brain space up and really like taking you in a direction mental health wise that is not in a good place, not healthy?
Can we go tangent on salt for a minute? Salts, because that's one thing from an athlete we used to hear before this: don't eat salt. Salt's bad and it does to your arteries and so forth. And now a lot of at least what I see is these athletes taking like an element or some sort of a salt or even salt in the morning. Is salt part of the analysis that you do with people? And I guess the reason I ask is, if it's so simple, which I believe it is that simple, a lot of experts say, well, you should probably test your genes, test your blood type. You should do for the performance athlete to make an individual and so forth, based on certain factors. This type of person right after lifting should have at least 50 grams of protein. All of that sign. You should have this amount of salt you lose in your body. Do you think that from a performance standpoint in college, are we gotten there where we're really looking at that level?
At the college level, no. Like, I feel like I'm still trying to get college students to eat breakfast. Like, and I'm not joking. No, I'm not joking. Like, so when we get into like high level, and there might be situations where you get into measuring sweat loss, like measuring and weighing an athlete pre versus post workout, and how much are they losing? And then you can calculate their sweat rate versus how much fluid they need and how much sodium they need, which essentially salt is sodium is the scientific word, and it is an electrolyte, and we need it for fluid balance in our body. But the average college student or average high school student, and even, to be honest, probably most professional athletes, you're not getting that detailed with them because you're just wanting them to eat breakfast. You're wanting to have a good fueling meal a couple hours before training. You're trying to get recovery going within 30 to 60 minutes. You're trying to get the basic foundational things down. And then if you have those, maybe you go on to more in-depth conversation about sodium or, fluid needs, that kind of stuff. I do think, like, for whatever reason, electrolytes are getting a heyday right now.
They are. And
I don't know why, but they are. And there's nothing wrong with electrolytes. We need them. Like, they're part of a healthy fluid balance in our body, help to maintain healthy blood pressure. But they're not any more important than any other aspect of nutrition. I would say in some ways people are focusing so much on electrolytes that they're missing the boat on what you really need during activity is carbohydrates. And the literature shows us that we need carbohydrates when you have any type of activity, intense activity, more than 60 minutes. And so an hour of practice is pretty common for most people, right? 1 hour plus 2 or
Sure.
3 hours. And then when I see athletes who are consuming either just water or water with electrolytes, that's missing out on the whole carbohydrate replacement. So for whatever reason, there's been such a focus on electrolytes and really missing kind of the mark on we need the carbohydrates.
So the common thought now is, not say common thought, this is beyond just, I'd say, college, high school. I even hear this from coaches that are starting to say, you can eat twice your, if you weigh 100 pounds, you can have 200 grams of protein, twice your weight. And then even if eating equal to your weight is probably more than you need, right? So whatever you could share what kind of the standard amount. Yeah. But the trend has been, and I think proteins you can't burn, right? Doesn't go anywhere. It goes right. You can go through the science of that better than I can, where a carbohydrate and a fat is burned. If you could kind of educate or bring that to the listener, what the difference is. But if athletes are replacing carbohydrates and saying, I don't want carbs, those are bad for me, I'll just drink water and almond or whatever sort of potassium, sodium, electrolyte I can have, I'm going to eat tons of protein but no carbs. What's the negative on that?
Well, the downside is your body is fueled by carbohydrates. That's what runs. Your body likes to run on carbohydrates. It prefers running on carbohydrates. It's good at running on carbohydrates. Your brain, so that's basically all the muscles in your body. Your brain only runs on carbohydrates. So your brain cannot adapt to any other fuel source. So athletes who have a low carbohydrate intake often have a hard time focusing during class or practice. They are kind of like a little dazed, like just not, they have a hard time like listening or remembering plays or just focusing and staying on task. But what we mostly see is underfueling overall leads to injuries, poor performance, poor recovery, fatigue, which then leads to challenges with sleep and it becomes a vicious cycle. So when we take one macronutrient, and the macronutrients are protein, carbohydrates, and fat, when we take one of them and we make that like the only focus or the main focus, then it like upsets the apple cart, so to speak. It throws everything out of balance. And protein is extremely important for building and repairing muscle tissue and helping us with satiety and blood sugar regulation. I mean, we need it. It's extremely important. But carbohydrates are extremely important as well, and fat is as well. So they all have their place. I always like to describe it as like players on a team. Like they're all working together on the same team, but every position on a team, pick any kind of sport you want, every position has a different responsibility, and they're working together as a team to win and to perform well. And that's exactly what happens with your macronutrients, your protein, your carbohydrates, and your fat. So when I see athletes who are focused just on protein, most of the time, I would say almost 100% of the time, it means their carbohydrate intake is too low.
Yeah, it's just kind of an if then.
And
they take it away.
Yeah, you just can't. So your fuel to your body, they're having a hard time getting through a practice. They're having a hard time focusing in class. They have a nagging injury that's just not going away. All of those things. And then they kind of feel like they're missing out on enjoying foods. Like they're like, oh, I really haven't had pasta in a while, and I haven't had bread. And well, yeah, when my roommate goes out when they all go out for dinner or meet at the dining hall or we go on a team dinner, I'm not eating this food. And I feel kind of like I'm missing out on something. So when it gets extreme like that, then to me, we need to shift it back into a balance. Again, it's not saying that protein's not important. It is, but it's just not more important than carbohydrates. When carbohydrates is not more important than protein. They're all needed for different reasons.
So move that into the mentorship then. So as you're helping others and you're doing workshops or talking to colleges, or talking to mentors, as we're trying to educate and make these, one, they have to learn. And then it's also, this is a blend of art and science. So we're talking a bit about the science of this, and maybe it's as simple as a third, and just all the things you spoke about. The art of it, though, is behavioral. And how do you go about working with mentors And is there a best practice? And what's your biggest challenge as you're trying to? Because you can't replicate Beth Wolfgram.
No,
but we want to get. We can't. You don't want to.
You shouldn't. You don't want to.
Oh,
you want people. No,
you're great. One great Beth Wolfgram.
No, but you want people to have their own approach. I think the reality is, like, if dietitians, whether they're dietetic students, interns, fellows, young dietitians in the field who want to be in sports nutrition, we're all learning the same information about the science. We all know the information. It's how do we deliver it? And I think relationship building is at the root of every athletic department, every multidisciplinary team, every contact you have with a coach, a potential dining hall, a parent, a team, all of those. It's relationship building. And it's basically getting to know them and what their needs are, and knowing like you have their back, you're in their corner, and you're there to help and support them. You're also not the food police. Like, I'm not the person who's going to say, no, as a team, you cannot go to XYZ restaurant. Like, I'm never going to say that. I want you to enjoy that post tournament meal as a team and enjoy that time together. So I'm not going to be the food police. I'm here to support you. I'm going to work with your budget. I'm going to work with your challenges. I'm going to understand you. And I'm going to get to know like what the particular challenges are, because even though there are overarching principles of sports nutrition, every single type of sport is different. Their energy systems are different. What they're requiring or their body is different. Their travel schedule is different. Their timing. They may play 3 games in a day. Somebody else may play 1 game a week. Somebody may travel across the country. Somebody else may never go more than 30 minutes from home. Everybody's situation is very, very different. And so your job, and this is what we talk about mentoring young dietitians in the sports realm, is getting to know your athletes, or getting to know your athletic department, getting to know, and that means getting to know everybody, getting to know the grounds crew, because they're going to give you information. They're going to help you understand things that maybe you didn't put together. Like, why are we not practicing at this certain time? And then you find out, oh, well, this is happening. The grounds crew tells you this, and you're like, start to put the pieces of the puzzle together.
So curiosity, asking questions is so, which to AI, the thing that concerns me, we talked about this before off, it's got to be within 12 to 24 months. AI will know you at a hyper personalized basis per athlete, know what you ate, have enough information to say, this is what you need to do, center back. Yeah. This is what you need to do, quarterback. Yeah. This is what you need to do, field hockey star, based on, and sadly, it could say based on history, right? Based on what your parents, and more research, it's not as much about what your parents were, right? It's not the hereditary side of health as much as it is you can impact your own health. Yeah. And if AI comes in and starts to say, this is what you should do, your mentorship model is it's about the art, less the science. Do you foresee a time when coaches and programs are going to, for scholarships with AI, or say, this is what you have to eat if you want my scholarship? I know you'd say, as a trailblazer, that is the worst thing you could do, is to tell them exactly what to do for all the things we talked about today. Do you think it's going to happen? Think it could happen?
I don't know. I mean, I think athletics is a very relational industry. I think like that's like saying someone can coach a team, and maybe we will get to that point. Someone will coach a team by, you'll pull up a document and read it, and like, this is what we have to do for workout today. What you don't get in that is the personal connection. And I think that's what a good practitioner delivers. That's what a good coach delivers, a good strength coach, that whole team of people, like humans, that we're connecting with other people. And I may know, yes, all the details that the AI figured out of grams and recommendations, but I may know like, oh, you just had a hard week because your grandmother passed away.
Exactly.
Or you just had a hard week because you had 3 exams and it was midterms, and then the dorm had a fire alarm in the middle of the night, or whatever. I may know some of the details that can help you navigate the real world of it. So it's not just about the recommendations that you can read on a piece of paper. It's knowing the athlete personally. And I think like that's the same with coaches, right? It's learning how to motivate that particular athlete, learning what speaks to them. That's what makes a good coach. Is it's not just doing a cookie cutter approach to every athlete, every team you ever interact with. It's figuring out, how does this team different than last year's team? How, and that's my job too, is figuring out how is this athlete different than maybe they were last season, or how is this field hockey team different than the one that I worked with, 6 months ago? And so I think what AI doesn't have is that personal connection and that personal recommendation and just, overall connection of being human and being, and having someone's back and being there, cheering them on and connecting.
Have you ever, so in the Northeast, there's a software for a hospital called MyChart. And MyChart will kind of tell me through Maine Medical Partners and Maine Health, it's got your history. It's basically what used to be pieces of paper. Here is everything about you from a health standpoint. Has there been an effort over the decades to have something similar? Maybe it was an entrepreneurial idea to kind of connect the sports psychologist with the strength and conditioning, with the nutrition, with the coach. Imagine this one, with the parent.
Yeah.
Having a common portal or place that everyone can go to that would have that information. Is that too utopian a thought that would ever happen?
I think there are some different products and different things out there that have something kind of like that. It gets tricky because some of it gets to be PHI, personal health information.
Got it.
The age of an athlete can impact how much information you share with, say, parents or coaches. When you get into medical information, you are limited on what you can actually, and this has happened in situations I've been at the college level, not everything is shared with the coaches or the parents. That is up to the student athlete to share that information because they are, after age 18, they are an adult. And so you have to be mindful of that type of information sharing. It may be shared with the performance team. The performance team may be, say, the strength coach or the athletic trainer, and other people in that team. And that information may be shared. And then you're trying to help provide information for that athlete to improve. At the end of the day, you still need someone to interpret the information and deliver it to the athlete. Because the athlete, like just reading it on a piece of paper or a computer or a phone, they're still going to ask questions like, so what does this mean? And how many times am I supposed to do this? And how often? And this doesn't work because my 9:00 class doesn't really start till 9:05 and I'm going to be late. And like life happens. And that's why I think like you'll never replace a human. Sure.
Yeah, I guess it's the notion of all the silos. There are reasons there will always be silos in the development of an athlete, and I just wonder at what point there is that kind of consolidation with entitlements that say, that's privileged information and so forth. Yeah. That looks at the my development, my mental health, and all of that. Does that get coordinated at some point? And it's a to be determined.
To be determined.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Yeah. So, so for me, one of the questions I want to wrap up this conversation on the notion of who impacted you the most in your journey, and if there was a butterfly effect. I know earlier it was kind of a bunch of wings came together in the journey to do it. It takes courage to go outside of the bounds of, I just got a job and I'm going to do whatever. I want to do something different. If there's a lasting impact where what you decided to do is of kindness and appreciation for other people, what is it? What person, what event was really the thing that created where we are today and all the work you've done? If you're going to look back, what was it? What was the kind of the event that kind of turned you into a leader in performance nutrition and mentorship?
Well, I think, I had, as we talked about in the very beginning, I had this idea, this vision of where this type of profession could go. And I didn't know anybody really doing that. And I was kind of puttering along and doing my own thing, one foot in front of the other, not really knowing where I was going. And then I found several people who were doing similar things at different universities and had formed an organization, which I'm part of now. And those were other people doing what I was doing at their own institution, at their own facility. And it made me feel I was no longer on an island. I was with other people who were like-minded, who had a growth mindset, who were willing to push the boundary, who were willing to keep going when people said, this is not really a full-time job. There's no full-time positions in this.
Okay.
Even though there were no full-time positions for a long time. And so as an organization and jumping in with them and having the mentorship of other colleagues who were going through what I was going through, that was, I think one of the things I have loved about my profession as a whole is we lift each other up. We are supportive of each other.
Okay.
We are there for each other. It is not competitive. You may be playing each other at the Rose Bowl or the World Championships or wherever you're playing each other on the field, but we are colleagues and we are many times friends.
How many are the we? When you say we, well, give me a size of we.
Our national organization, which we just changed our name to ASPDA, which is American Society of Professional Sports Dietitian Association. And I want to say we're probably a couple, I think maybe 1,500 to 2,000 now.
2,000. Wow.
Which started off with 10 people and has grown over the years. And really over the last 15 years, now if you look at in the United States, every Division I college program has a sports dietitian, if not multiple. And 15 years ago, there were probably 8 or 10 across the country total at all. So it's grown a lot, and now we've grown into areas of working with Olympic athletes, working at all professional levels, MLB, NBA, Major League Soccer, NFL, all the professional sports. Also getting into working with our military, so our tactical athletes and first responders. Then trickling down to, now to Division II and III schools. And so the growth is huge. There's still lots of room for growth, but there has been so much growth in full-time positions. So I think becoming part of a group of other people who were also, like I said, had a growth mindset, were willing to step out of the box and work hard for something that we all knew was a possibility, but there was nothing, we were trailblazing at the time. And in the process of that, I was able to develop internship programs, fellowship programs, other competency-based programs to help young dietitians have more mentorship than I did, because I didn't really have a mentor because there was nobody before to mentor with. So to create those programs for new and up and coming dietitians, and that's probably been the biggest joy of, besides working with the athletes, which I have loved and enjoyed impacting lives, but impacting the lives of other dietitians. And, I'm still connected to many of them now who have gone in different ways, work in professional sports, work at Division I schools, maybe starting their own programs, and to watch them then flourish and to see them taking the skills they learned with me during our time and then go on and flourish and do their own thing and give back to the field. That's probably my greatest joy.
That's the greatest joy and the kindness that that group has brought. Now let's turn that kindness, and I don't know if you do this. This organization does it, so that's why might get in trouble, Beth. I apologize if I do. But one of the things we talk about is the pyramid, right? And the higher you get up, right? The NBA, the NFL, they're at the top of the pyramid, right? The MLS and the Premier League, they get the best.
Yeah.
They get the most individual work. They get the best dietitians. They get the most coordination across all the modalities we talk. They get it all. The lower ones, we're hoping through mentorship, we provide that for all in that pyramid. Well, what we'd like to do with Footy4MySoul, within the context of performance nutrition is invert the pyramid. So somebody that may not become the next superstar athlete also has access. So the as they progress, maybe they don't make it up to Premier League, MLS, or NWSL for women, but they become a mentor or a coach, or they're involved in the sport, or they work in the organization, but they're part of the sport they love. Now, why is that? Because pay to play has made it, right? And that very few can make it to the top. Very few can afford to get to the top. So what do we do for those to broaden the pyramid? The more they are involved in football, soccer, footy, or any other sport, the more they can appreciate and get the best practices from nutrition and performance. How do they get it? So it's a hard question because the organization, and this is where I kind of get in trouble, and we're friends, I can ask you the trouble question, is that organizations have to pay themselves, right? It's funded, and ultimately who funds it, I'm assuming, are the top of the pyramid, provide the means to have an organization, to have 2,000 people to do this vocation, right? How do we turn the vocation to the stuff that comes out of that for those that can't afford it? So the most basic, third, or what do you do with people that have food shortages, or what do you do if you can't fuel enough? Because they can fuel enough. They're rich. They're the best. Yeah. It's a challenge, right? I'm not asking your organization to do it. That's not fair. But who does it? So that's my question is,
I mean, I think
who's
it's
thinking
a good
about
question,
them?
and I will say we are a nonprofit. We have lots of scholarships. We have lots of opportunities for young dietitians. You know, there are dietitians who are involved, and then there are allied health professionals who can be involved. But I think, like, on a bigger level, like, you know, if someone is looking for someone to help with nutrition in general, you can find a dietitian. They don't necessarily have to be a sports dietitian.
Fair.
If you're looking for like base foundational information and you want like the voice of reason and you want a professional, certainly, you know, a sports dietitian is great, but a dietitian in and of itself is a great first step. You may find somebody who has a very strong interest in working with active people, but they haven't quite done all of the steps to become a sports dietitian. And they are all over the place.
So we're going to provide links to that for the show, which is important. Because I think it would be great to share the organization that really you're a trailblazer of for the top. And most of our listeners are, you know, they want to become the next superstar, right? Yeah. But I think what we will also make available to people is what are your other options, the basic stuff and so forth. Okay.
So I think, you know, we have a national credentialing organization. Like to become a registered dietitian, everybody has to take the exam. Everybody has to do continuing ed. And I believe they still have a link that you can do Find My, and you find a dietitian. You type in your state or your zip code or whatever, and you can find dietitians in your area. And they may focus on different areas of nutrition, but in the end, you likely can find somebody who has a little bit of interest in sports or maybe a lot of interest. And then I think now with the world we live in, like people do lots of things remote. People do lots of things, virtual meetings, virtual team talks, virtual consulting. You don't necessarily have to be in the same place as the team or the group you're working with in order to benefit them. Because some of it is, it's not the one-on-one stuff with athletes, it's a systematic stuff. Like I just helped a high school this week, like they have a budget. Here's what we do for our budget for post-game meals or travel meals. What can we do differently? And I gave them 3 suggestions. We didn't change their budget at all, but it's like, do these 3 things, and we changed the fueling. And I didn't even have to be there. It was just a conversation on the phone. So I think there's lots of ways to think outside the box.
So that's our last question. I think when you said think outside the box. So ultimately, all the good art and science you give them will help their thoughts and beliefs, hopefully, right? They're gonna be educated, right? And from that, their actions will be better towards fuel. And then one thing you've brought up a couple times is the emotional side, better emotions. Actions and emotions are better because of learning these thoughts and beliefs. So the legacy of all this, kind of the Beth Wolfgram athlete for my soul, because it's not just footy
Right.
in this case, I know what you do is fun and you enjoy it. And the legacy when you're no longer around and retired, or, sitting back and you've got mentors doing it, and they say, yeah, Beth Wolfgram, she was something. You know what? Her courage or her creativity, she just inspired me to do something. What is it that you want to be known for as kind of in your soul, in how you help people? What is it that drives it? Like, how do you want to be remembered and known for your contribution to being a trailblazer?
That's a deep question.
It is. And it's our last question, because you really want to get to the heart of,
it's deep.
It's much bigger than the actions and the emotions and what you've learned. Your soul of what you built. You didn't need to do this. Yeah. And all these other folks, men and women, it took a lot of courage, and they all cared to go do this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. There are a lot of great people in my profession who I admire and look up to and think the world of, like, who have done amazing things. I think, my what I take from it all is, again, I go back to the relationships. The relationships I have with my athletes, there's still people I run into 15 years later. They're like, "Oh my gosh, do you remember when you took me to the grocery store?" I'm like, "Yeah, I remember that day. We went to the Walmart and we walked up and down the aisles and we did," or I'll see them and they'll be like, "Do you remember that game that I was cramping and you helped?" And, so it's the relationships with the athletes. It's a relationship with the coaches, the staff, the support staff. It's the relationships with the people and feeling like I'm part of something bigger than just me. It's not just about the nutrition. It's not about peanut butter and jellies. It's not about having a sports drink or timing, but it's making people's life better. It's making it better and having more fun. And certainly in the meantime, we're maybe improving performance and outcomes, but it's that relationship building with the whole team. I have such fond memories of trips and games and rainy practices and fueling under tents with like broken fans and birds flying in and like all these crazy situations that I look back and I'm like, number one, we were overcoming a lot of obstacles and trying to make fueling a priority. But we did it together with other people that, like, the memories and the connection that we had was something you'll just never forget. Like, I've had such a joyful career in that way. Like, I feel very blessed to have had a career I have loved and really, like, can't think of a single other thing I would rather be doing.
What I heard from that was awesome. Authenticity, being genuine and caring about what you do. What I heard was that it was about life, and the nutrition is a part of the life, so it's bigger. And what's important to us with Footy4MySoul, more than anything else, is connecting the experiences. In our newsletter, every time we do a show, we write something, a newsletter summary of what we learned. So that's the goal. And I could tell you from this, it's more important to learn about the process behind it than the actual tricks and recipes.
Yes.
And it comes down to caring about the athlete. So I guess for those that do listen, the parent and the caregiver and the mentor to any athlete, we can't push them. We have to be authentic and then move along a journey. And there, I guess to summarize, there is no super food, super menu. Is it fuel enough? Fuel enough? And
there's not.
Just fuel enough.
I say fuel with purpose.
Fuel
which
with
means,
purpose.
That's kind of my tagline, fuel with purpose. And that purpose is different at different times of your life. It's at different times of the day, at different times, different seasons in your life. And fuel with purpose is such a broad topic, but it's adequacy. It's having balance. It's incorporating lots of different foods. But no, there's no one food. There's no one way to eat. There's no one big hack. It's so many different things, and it would be different in a month or a year, depending on your goals.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
You are the best. Beth Wolfgram.
Thanks,
Take
Justin.
care.
Thank you.